right, for this month, our theme is spiritual guidance and personal responsibility. Spiritual guidance and personal responsibility. And this is part of our vision of a world that works for everyone. And the title of the talk today is My Mind is a Center of Divine Activity. And this is sort of a takeoff from a quote by Thomas Troward, who was one of the teachers of Ernest Holmes. Ernest Holmes, I don't know that he ever met Thomas Troward, but he certainly studied him because he explained what they called at the time mental science. Remember, there was no psychology in those days, but he talked about mental science, and he explained how it worked. And then Ernest Holmes took that and said, how could it work for us? But Thomas Troward said, my mind is a center of divine operation. The divine operation is always for expansion and fuller expression. And this means the production of something beyond what has gone before, something entirely new, not included in past experience, though proceeding out of it by an orderly sequence of growth. Therefore, since the divine cannot change its inherent nature, it must operate the same way in me, right? Because I'm an emanation of the divine. It must operate in the same manner in me, consequently, in my own special world, in which I am the center. Each of us is the center of our own world, right? You know, we all have these little planets and constellations around us called family and friends, and so we are the center of our universe, of which I am the center. It will move forward to produce new conditions, always in advance of any that have gone before. It will produce new conditions, always in advance of any that have gone before. That's sort of a good news, bad news. Because if we're comfortable where we are, it means that something's going to change. Because that's the nature of life. Things will change. And the question is, are we flowing with the change, or are we resisting the change? And as we know, resistance is futile. So here we are in this changeable and changing universe. And I remember one of my ministerial teachers, I think it was actually the Reverend Dr. Michael Beckwith of the Agape Center, said that my job as a minister was to comfort the disturbed and disturb the comfortable. Or, you know, comfort the afflicted and afflict the comfortable. So we're exploring what is going on, because we know that change is happening. We can feel it. We know that something is moving. It always is. And Einstein said the only thing he knew for sure was that something was moving. And it is moving. So the book for this month is The More Beautiful World Our Hearts Know Is Possible. The More Beautiful World Our Hearts Know Is Possible by Charles Eisenstein. And he talks about the story that we tell ourselves about the world. And we know that all of us have stories that we have created about life and the nature of life. And some of it we got from our culture, and some of it we got from our family, and some of it we have from our personal experience, and some of it we have from educational experiences or teachers that we've had. And so all of this is evolving through us to create the story. Well, he is talking about the cultural story. And he says, sometimes I feel nostalgic for the cultural mythology of my youth, a world in which there was nothing wrong with soda pop, in which the Super Bowl was important, in which America was bringing democracy to the world, in which the doctor could fix you, in which science was going to make life better and better, and they just put a man on the moon. So that was the world that many of us came from, that world. And what we can see is that those assumptions and those things that we thought were true are falling apart. They are dissolving. They are evolving into something else. We're becoming more aware, of things like soda pop is not good for you, and doctors can't always fix you, and we are not. Maybe people in the world don't want democracy. Did we ever ask them if they wanted our wonderful system? Which is working so well for us right now. So he sees the story of cultural evolution as a story of growth, followed by crisis, followed by breakdown, followed by renaissance, the emergence of a new kind of civilization. And I would say we're sort of in the crisis breakdown mode right now, but we have to remember that we do come through this. And we have all probably had personal experiences where we had perhaps an experience where we thought we were going along, la, 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 and then something happened. And it was, a wake-up call, a disturbance of some kind. For instance, I have a cousin who's very overweight. They always get to hear stories about my family. I have a cousin who's very overweight, and she got this very bad attack of cellulitis that almost killed her. It was such a virulent infection. And she said, "It's my wake-up call. I have waited too long to exercise and to eat right and to take care of my body, and my body is saying enough already." And what I know was that wasn't the first wake up. We get a little nudge, then we get like a smack, and then sometimes if we don't get it, if we don't realize something's out of alignment, boom, we have to get the big kabong in order to realize we have to change, because we resist it. And so we have to realize that that's what's happening culturally as well. That we've had some wake-up calls and we haven't quite woken up. And we're in the process of waking up. We have moments of waking up. We have moments of realization. And it's about shifting and opening to something entirely new ways of being, and looking at, first of all, asking ourselves questions about the way things are now. He talks about what he calls the story of the people, or what he says is we've grown up on a story of separation, right? The rugged individual, right? John Wayne out there, all right, Pilgrim, he's going to solve it. But if you watch those movies, he has got other people. He's negotiating with people. He's getting them involved. He's not doing it all by himself, so I don't know where. Maybe it was the Marlboro man that got us off track. But, it's not about the rugged individual. It's about all of us together. It's about all of us together. And so he talks about that we can't change anything without changing everything. We can't switch from fossil fuels without changing the economic system that supports our support of fossil fuel production. So it doesn't just change the one thing, it changes everything connected. And guess what? Everything's connected to everything. The good news and the bad news. So he says, we developed this story, we developed this cultural story to answer these questions, the big questions. Who am I? Why do things happen? What is the purpose of life? What is human nature? What is sacred? Who are we as a people? Where did we come from and where are we going? And so he says the answers that this particular thing that we're working from now, this cultural story that's sort of the underlying belief system that sort of runs us either consciously or unconsciously, says that you are a separate individual. Who are you? You are a separate individual among other separate individuals in a universe that is separate from you as well. And why do things happen? The impersonal forces of physics act upon a generic material substrate of fundamental particles. That's why that happens. Okay. Oh, that helps. What is the purpose of life? There is no purpose, only cause. Okay. The universe at bottom is blind and dead. Thought is but an electrochemical impulse, love but a hormonal cascade that rewires our brains. Okay. What is human nature? To protect ourselves against this hostile universe of competing individuals and impersonal forces, we must exercise as much control as possible. We seek out anything that furthers that aim. Money, status, security, information, and power, all these things we called worldly. So, at the very foundation of our nature, our motivations and our desires is what only can be called evil. That is what the ruthless maximizer of self-interest is. So what therefore is sacred? Since the blind, ruthless pursuit of self-interest is antisocial, it is important to overcome our biological programming and pursue higher things. So we pursue higher things because we think we have to. Who are we as a people? We're a special kind of animal, the apex of evolution, processing brains that allow the cultural as well as the genetic transfer of information. I'm getting real inspired, aren't you? Okay. Where have we come from and where are we going? We started out as naked, ignorant animals, barely hanging on to survival, living lives that were nasty, brutish, and short. Fortunately, thanks to our big brains, science replaced superstition and technology replaced religion. We ascended to become lords and possessors of nature, domesticating plants and animals, harnessing natural forces, conquering diseases, laying bare the deepest secrets of the universe. Our destiny is to complete that conquest, to free ourselves from labor, from disease, from death itself, to ascend to the stars and leave nature behind altogether. Okay, that is the story of separation. That is the story of separation. So Eisenstein says, yeah, that ain't it. That is not it. What we are looking for, what we are evolving into is the story of what he calls interbeing. Interbeing. And that's the new story. Now, the thing about going to a new story, just like any transition in our lives, we have the ending of the old, but we don't just leap into the new. Sometimes we have the ending of the old, and then there's this really fuzzy, messy, chaotic part where it's a mystery. We don't know what's going to happen. We just sort of are in this transition phase. And then there is the new thing, and the new thing calls us, and then we gradually move into the new thing. So right now, we sort of are realizing that the old story is fading away. We're letting it go, but we haven't made it to the new story yet. We're in the muck. We're in the mystery. We're in the, how are we going to do this? And even he says, I don't know how to do this. I'm just telling you what I think, and I'm trying to make the transition myself. But it's a group activity. He says enlightenment is a group activity. Now that's new news for those of us who think about those guys who lived in caves and became enlightened and all that kind of stuff. They couldn't have lived in the cave if somebody didn't bring them food. So, it is a group activity. So, interbeing. Let's talk about interbeing. What are the truths of interbeing? That my being partakes of your being and that of all beings. This goes beyond interdependency. Our very existence is relational. Our very existence is relational. And if we look at, quantum physics, quantum mechanics is telling us that it's not about the particles. It's about the interrelationship between the particles that holds our universe together, that makes things as they are. It's all of these little particles relating to one another. I mean, nature has so many beautiful and wonderful relationships. A couple of years ago, we went on a hike around this time when the wildflowers were blooming. And Patricia Burbank took us up there, and we had a naturalist with us telling us about the plants and the flowers. And he talked about the lupin. And you notice on the lupin that there's purple, and then there's these little white parts on the blossom. The white is to tell the bee that a bee has already been there. Once a bee has pollinated that little blossom, it turns white to tell the other bees, you don't have to come here because we're done. So we've got this interspecies plant-insect communication. So everything in nature is interrelated. We found that so amazingly, with the whole decimation of buffalo and wolves and all of the things that have upset the balance in Yellowstone. And now that they've restored the wolves to Yellowstone, we once showed the video of how returning the wolves to Yellowstone has returned the balance of the ecology in Yellowstone. Because all of it helps everything, and everything is required for everything to function. So, all of this interdependency. That therefore, what we do to another, we do to ourselves. What we do to another, we do to ourselves. Each of us has a unique and necessary gift to give the world. The purpose of life is to express our gifts. Every act is significant and has an effect on the cosmos. Every act is significant and has an effect on the cosmos. We are fundamentally unseparate from each other and from all beings and from the universe. Every person we encounter and every experience we have mirrors something in ourselves. Every person we encounter and every experience we have mirrors something in ourselves. The story of Interbeing also says that humanity is meant to join fully the tribe of all life on earth, offering our uniquely human gifts towards the well-being and development of the whole. The purpose, consciousness, and intelligence are innate properties of matter and the universe. Purpose, consciousness, and intelligence are innate properties of matter and the universe. We are living in an intelligent universe. So this intelligence is present in everything, including rocks. we think of rock, I mean, you could say, oh, I know trees are alive and plants are alive, and so I can think that maybe there is a consciousness there, but how about rocks? How about the earth? Consciousness in the earth. Because it all came from the one that is consciousness itself. So it came out of that consciousness, so everything has an element of consciousness. Now, does that mean it can make decisions? I don't know what the consciousness of a rock could be like, but what I know is that there's something in there that is conscious. Because there's something everywhere that is made of the same consciousness. I know this is very woo-woo in a way, but you know, it's essential that we change our story if we want to save our planet and our lives. We have to change our story. And so the thing is, am I willing to just change to a new story because it feels better? It makes me feel better. And again, it calls me to do something. If I think that every act I do and every thought I think is having an effect on the universe and on everyone else, how important is it for me to think the best of everyone? To look for the good and praise it? To do what I am called to do. If I go into the restroom and there's a bunch of paper towels on the floor, I take a paper towel and I pick those up and I throw them away because I like order. And I'm contributing to the order of the universe. You know, so every act, every small act that we do makes a difference. Makes a difference. Every thought that we think makes a difference. And one of the things that I loved about reading Parker Palmer's book, Hidden Wholeness, was that he talked about turning judgment into wonder. Turning judgment into wonder. When we experience ourselves looking at something and judging it, can we shift to wonder? Can we wonder why that person would possibly act that way or do that? He talks about cynics being people who have, wounded places. They have been wounded, and so when we encounter cynicism, which if we start talking about this, we encounter cynicism. He says, listen compassionately and be present to the hurting that they're experiencing, because a cynic is probably someone who has had an experience that crushed their idealism and betrayed their hopes. And so they don't want you to be hopeful because it touches their wound of wounded hopefulness. But we just have to hold each other tenderly and realize that we all have these wounded places. And we are here to help each other, to move through that. I did a memorial yesterday for a 97-year-old man. And he and his wife had had a divorce, a really painful divorce, a long time ago. And she took everything, including the kids. And so his kids had not seen him for decades. And then they finally got in touch. When one of the daughters had children, they got in touch and they would get together with him, but it was very superficial. They never wanted to talk about the past because that was such a hurtful thing. And so they ended up just living, on the surface until 3 years ago. One of the daughters said, I need to talk to you about this. And they began to have the conversation about the pain that they both had in that separation. And it brought them closer together, and it created such a loving relationship. And then the other child also was able to connect and to spend the last 8 months of her life with her dad, helping him. And he was an amazing man, and they had missed out on so much, and he had missed out on their lives because they both had been telling each other stories that weren't true. They had both been telling each other stories that weren't true, and when they finally got to communicate and tell each other the truth, there was only love. There was only love. So that is our call, to realize that everybody has pain, everybody has wounds, and that we need to help each other to heal. That's part of what we're doing here. I found this, I think I found it on Facebook. Anything that annoys you is teaching you patience. Anyone who abandons you is teaching you how to stand upon your own 2 feet. Anything that angers you is teaching you forgiveness and compassion. Anything that has power over you is teaching you how to take your power back. Anything that you hate is teaching you unconditional love. Anything you fear is teaching you courage to overcome your fear. Anything you can't control is teaching you how to let go. I forgot to tell you to turn off your cell phone. All right. So we're just about telling ourselves a new story and reminding ourselves that what we do, what we think, what we say matters. It matters to the overall feeling tone of our lives and the universe. So our affirmation for today is, I remember that what I think is important. 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 And so it is.